What's up guys, it's Z here, welcome back. Today we're going to take a look at the meta again. We did the top 10 best decks of the meta post-Lightning Overdrive, and I think it's time we covered the top 10 rogue decks. And to be honest, I've never had a harder time making a list because this shows just how great the format is going to be. There were so many decks I had to choose from, but ultimately I narrowed it down to 10 decks, and I think these are probably the ones that are going to do, at least most of them are going to be the most represented rogue decks. Of course, there are so many other decks that you could argue for this list, so if you have any other suggestions, if you think any other deck is going to be really good, comment down below and say why this deck is going to be a good rogue contender for the format. But for now, before we begin the video, if you enjoyed, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our upcoming videos, and now let's get to the list. So number 10, Altergeist. For this spot I was debating between Altergeist and Sky Striker, but ultimately I went with Altergeist because the reason Sky Striker is still being considered a decent deck is mainly because of Mystic Mine. I don't think I've ever seen in the past couple of years a Striker list without running Mystic Mine, and at the end of the day any deck can win like that, so I don't feel like Striker is that good, to be honest. But Altergeist actually has a way to win on its own, and the deck is really good. I mean, it's not as good as a Subterror, which I included in the top 10 best decks of the format, but still it's a really good deck, and I know a lot of people use it for a budget deck because there's nothing really expensive in that deck, and it's a control deck that kind of cannot use anything else, and this is why I put it on number 10. I do have another really good control deck higher on this list. I'm going to explain why I think Altergeist has been dethroned even from that spot. But still, Altergeist, it's a deck that if it gets rolling, then there's nothing your opponent can do about it, and you're going to get so much advantage that you're going to completely overwhelm your opponent eventually. Number 9, Zombie. So Zombie, I think, is going to make a comeback, mainly because of Zombie World. The more the Zombie World counters the top decks of the format, the more of a chance Zombie actually has to play, because if it goes first and slaps a Zombie World on the field, if you're playing against stuff like Dragon Link or against stuff like Tri-Brigade, there's nothing your opponent can do, because Dragon Link needs dragons in order to link away for stuff like LP, Pisty, Romulus, Heavenly Spheres. If everything becomes zombies, then they can't do anything. And same thing with Tri-Brigade. They lock themselves into a condition that they can only use Beast, Beast Warrior, and Winged Beast monsters to link summon, but if they become zombies, then they are under their own restriction and they cannot link summon. So Zombie, if you go first, you have a really good chance of winning. The problem with the deck is that going second, it cannot really do much, unless you open like Zombie World Super Poly, but then again, if your opponent knows what they're doing against the deck, they're going to negate Zombie World no matter what, because they're not going to let something like that happen. And the deck has a lot of choke points, especially from hand traps from going first. Sometimes maybe getting your Solitaire dashed can mean the end of your turn, but I think if you build the deck correctly, you can play around some of those weaknesses, and the deck has really good power in just making 1-2 card combos that can end on stuff like Zombie World, Ballard Drodge. Even has the Rivalry win condition, which I think is an insane win condition for the deck, because even if you're playing against a deck that doesn't get hurt by Zombie World, if you have Zombie World and Rivalry, I don't think there's any deck out there that is not a set 5 pass deck that can play around that. So I think there are a lot of fans of the deck that can make this deck work, and I'm pretty sure we are going to see a little bit more than this format than we did in the previous formats. Number 8, Numeron. Numeron has been a deck that ever since Zexal got banned, people actually started playing it as an OTK version, and I think they found a lot more success as an OTK version when they're trying to play with Zexal and Eldritch and something like that. And now Numeron is still a really great deck. It can catch a lot of people off guard because the deck just uses one card to OTK, and the rest of the deck can be stuff that help you deal with your opponent's board, and being able to resolve Numeron network means that you're most likely going to win the game, because if the gates hit the field, then you can just run over your opponent with beaters, and the rest 5 cards in your hand can be cards to help you deal with an established board, to help you resolve your Numeron network. So this is why this deck is really good, and it's a decent deck going first. It has Memories of Hope, which can help it draw cards, because I'm pretty sure you do play a lot of hand traps in a deck like this by that point, so you can draw those hand traps with Memories of Hope, and Numeron network is a 1-card Appaloosa, so that's a decent stuff you can do going first. It's not completely useless going first, but of course the main strategy of the deck is to go second and try to OTK with the gates. Number 7, Madolte. Madolte, I think, is the most complete deck I have on this list. It's a deck that has pretty much everything, but the problem with it is that it's a little bit weak against the top meta decks, but in certain circumstances the deck can thrive super well, because with Tiramisu, I don't think there will ever be a format that an effect like Tiramisu's is going to be irrelevant, and the deck can OTK, the deck can go first now that it has a searchable disruption as well. It has a bit of everything. It can run cards like D-Shifter, it can run Goes Unmatch, which are really good blowouts against certain decks of the format. Most decks of the format, I mean D-Shifter, come on, an effect that's a Macrocosmos, what format this is not going to be relevant. But the reason I don't have it higher is because the Lightning Overdrive set that I got released recently just gave such a huge boost to a lot of other decks. You're going to see in the upcoming entries in this list that you're going to see so many decks that got support support from Lightning Overdrive, and this just shows how great of a set this is, because so many decks became meta because of this set, and so many other decks became actually rogue contenders that these decks were not really doing anything before, but now they have a really good chance. And this is why I put Madolte a little bit lower, because it didn't get a really good boost recently. So I think the deck is still good, but it's not going to be as good as it used to be, because now there are other rogue decks that overthrown decks like Numeron and Madolte, which I would put way higher in previous formats, but now there are other decks that are going to be so much better. But still, Madolte is a really good deck. If you like the deck, you can make it work. The deck, you can either incorporate it to go first, you can incorporate it to go second, depending on what you want to do, but still the deck has a little bit of everything, and it's a really great deck. Number 6, Traptrix Amazement. This is the first deck that we have here out of that got new cards from Lightning Overdrive, and this is the reason I talked about Altergeist not being able to incorporate other engines. The Amazement engine is basically an Altergeist, but as an engine that can be splashed in any trap deck except Altergeist, because Altergeist has the restriction of multi-faker, and you cannot something like an Arlecchino if you use it, so you cannot really incorporate anything else. But Traptrix can use this engine so well, and Traptrix not only got Amazement as support, but it also got direct support in Vesicula and Cularia, and the deck can do so much more now, so I think it's a lot better than Altergeist, just because of the fact that it has so many tools to it. It's able to set up a lot of negates that Altergeist was able to do, and pretty much they do the same thing up to an extent, but Traptrix then becomes a little bit better, just because of cards like Arlecchino, and also being able to incorporate stuff like Utopia Double, which can OTK your opponent out of nowhere, which is something Altergeist cannot really have. The most amount of damage Altergeist can do consistently is 7700, which is not enough to win games, unfortunately, so this is why Altergeist is a little bit weaker. But Traptrix has the potential to OTK with just one attack. The Amazement actually gives it even more attack power, which is something the deck lacked if it was not able to go for Utopia Double, because Arlecchino is a decent beater, and being able to go for Horror House, which flips monsters face down, is a disruption that against any combo deck is going to be devastating, especially against Dragon Link, because if you send the monsters to the grave, then they're going to bring them back with stuff like World Legacy Guard Dragon, but if you flip them face down, they're completely stuck there. There is nothing they can do with those monsters, so this is why Horror House is such an insane card, and Traptrix being able to get advantage just by activating normal traps and being able to accumulate all the resources you need in order to completely destroy your opponent. This is why I think that this combo makes Traptrix one of the best rogue decks for the next format. Number 5, Salamangreat. Salamangreat is just an immortal deck. It's the new Burning Abyss, probably. I mean, come on, the deck is not an unfair deck in any extent, at least not anymore, with Stalio being banned, but the deck does what it does so consistently and so well, and with stuff like Transcode Talker and Access Code Talker, it even has the power to go for game with Update Jammer and stuff like that. So it's not like the deck is just a control deck. It has the tools to OTK very consistently, and being able to get to the traps and Sunlight Wolf every single game means that if you, especially if you plan to play on a bigger event, a deck like this, if you're trying to play something rogue, is going to give you the most amount of results, because it's a deck that's going to play every single game. At least 90% of the games it's going to play. It's going to see plays because it's so consistent. So this is why I think Salamangreat will always be a really good deck, because it's just like BA used to be, being able to get Dante every single hand because every card worked as an extender, and this is exactly what Salamangreat does. Every card you can use to make for a Sunlight Wolf and then make even more plays. So I think this deck is going to be in this list pretty much forever until we see something completely overthrow it like BA was overthrown by Salamangreat. If we see another deck like this in the future, then maybe Salamangreat is not going to be that relevant, but I still think that Salamangreat is such an amazing deck that people will still keep playing for a long time. Number 4, Plunder Patrol. I think out of every deck that I've included in this list, people are going to be happy for this one, because this deck has just been such a cool deck ever since its release. The concept is just amazing, and the support it got now with Ravenwing just makes this deck work. Before, the deck was really weak. It could not spam a lot on the field, and it still cannot really spam, but it's mostly like an Altergeist Traptrix version of the deck. You just accumulate advantage, but the thing is, with Ravenwing you have more extenders, and the deck can incorporate other cards to help it break boards, or even go first, can play a lot of hand traps. You don't really need a lot of cards in order to play with this deck, and the more you summon more of your ships on the field, you're going to get more advantage, you're going to get more disruptions, and with Lys and Mork, you're going to be destroying your opponent's boards every time they try to do something, and being able to draw more cards with Blackbeard means that you can keep your hand full. So this is why I think this deck, now with support it got from Lightning Overdrive, is going to be a really huge contender, and the card is just a common, so I think everyone's going to pick it up. The deck is not expensive at all, so if there are a lot of fans of the deck out there before, then now you can just imagine what they're going to do with the deck, and I think the deck has the potential to be a really good rogue contender because the support it got was just amazing. An extender that recycles from the grave, I mean, what deck would not want something like that? It's just amazing. So yeah, be careful for this deck. You're going to see it a lot more now, and I'm pretty sure that it can win games very, very consistently. Now moving on to number 3, Code Talker. So for the top 3 decks, I think that that I put the most combo-heavy decks, and this is because in a format like we're going to right now, with stuff like Tri-Brigade and Dragon Link, of course, not considering the ban list that we're going to have soon, but still, we cannot really predict exactly what's going to happen there. Maybe nothing will happen, maybe a lot will happen, we don't know. So I'm considering these decks that have the best chance that the decks are going to be played against right now. So Code Talker being able to go for the extra link with Evely and Avramax with the Salamangreat Sanctuary means that your opponent is not going to be able to do anything because they cannot crash Evely. The deck has a lot of extenders, they're all searchable, but the problem with the deck is that it's a little bit weak going second because it needs to play so many cards in the deck that it kind of has around 10 flex spots or even less in order to play cards to help it break boards or deal with established boards or something, or hand drops to prevent your opponents from making any boards. So this is why they didn't put it higher. Otherwise, this deck, the explosiveness of this deck would put it a lot higher. The problem is that it has to play a lot of cards in order to be able to do that explosiveness. So this is why I didn't put it higher than that. But still, it's a really good deck. It has started making a resurgence recently, and the deck is just so good. Everything in it has a kind of reprint except Access Code, of course, but still, the cards that got printed in the Legacy of the Duelist, the video game, they got reprinted in Maximum Gold and other sets. So the deck is really cheap now, so you can pick it up very cheap. And Access Code is not even that necessary, to be honest. I mean, of course, it's a broken card to play in the deck, but you don't need it. The deck has so many beaters, being able to summon Firewall, Avramax, and stuff like that. You don't need to be able to go for game. You have so many talkers that you can just summon all those 2300 attackers and just attack for game. Access Code is just the easiest way to win, but it doesn't really need it to win. So if you want to play a full budget version of the deck, don't be afraid that you don't have Access Code. You can still play the deck. It's going to be really good, especially going first. Number 2, Orchest. Yes, we're going to see Orchest again, and if you thought Scrap Raptor was a boost for Dinos, it's just such a boost for Orchest, because being able to get so many copies of Scrap Recycler means that you're able to do your combo so consistently, because before, you had just 3 copies of Scrap Recycler, and that was it. Now with Scrap Yard, Fossil Dig, and 3 Scrap Raptor, if you want to max out on consistency, technically you can play 12 copies of Scrap Recycler, which is absolutely incredible. I mean, how can you break when you have 12 starters? I mean, of course, they're susceptible to hand traps, but you can play extenders in order to go for Scrap Wyvern, because people that don't know how to play against the deck, they hand trap Scrap Recycler, but that's a mistake, because then you're going to go into Scrap Wyvern, and you're going to completely destroy your opponent and do the full combo because your opponent wasted their hand trap. So if you want to play against this deck, then I suggest keeping your hand traps for Wyvern. Is going to be much more beneficial for you. But if you want to play with this deck, then go for it. This is a format that Orchest can be not as good as it used to be, but it's going to be a really good deck. And if it goes uninterrupted, what it can do is absolutely ridiculous. And the follow-up this deck has is, of course, very broken, because you have all those effects coming back from the grave every single turn. Dingirsu being able to send those cards back into the grave by putting them from the banish zone and as materials means that you will always have a follow-up, and you can play stuff like Mahina if you want in the deck to be able to go into more power plays, but that would make the deck a little bit more bricky, but a little bit more powerful. So you can adapt the deck depending on what you need. If you want to go for a more consistent build, if you want to go for a more powerful build, the deck is very adaptable. You can do so much, and the restriction that locks you into Dark is not even that relevant, because it's only for the rest of this turn, so you can do everything you want before you use an Orchest effect, and then do the Orchest play while also having cards like Lib or Masquerade on the field to help you go for more plays, like going up a Lusa during your opponent's turn, Lib bouncing another card. So yeah, the deck doesn't do more than it used to, but it does what it used to way more consistently, which is why I think Orchest is going to be a huge deck for the upcoming Fortet, so keep your eye on that moving forward. And now we have the best rogue deck of the new format post-Lightning Overdrive, and that's Adignister. We've been waiting for this support for a while now, and to be honest, the OCG has already shown us the power of this deck, and it's basically the evolution that Prankits had for Adignisters. 1-card combos, this is what the deck can do now. Because of Dark Infant, Adignister being able to search Island means that with just any monster, not just having to draw a Picari or search a Picari, you can search your field spell, and if the monster you summon is Agiti, then you can go for stuff like your Arrival Cybers Adignister on top of having a Cybers Quantum Dragon on the field to protect it from attacks, because that's its only weakness. Being 4000 attack and effect means that it can tie to cards like Access Code or Boral Sword, but having a Cybers Quantum on the field means that your opponent has to attack Quantum first, which has the Grand Mole effect, so that's not going to work. And being able to do that with just 1 card means that it can play so many cards to be able to counter your opponent's board, or break boards, or stop your opponent from making a board, which is why I think is just a better version of Code Talker. It cannot do as much as Code Talker does. Yes, Code Talker is more explosive, but Adignister doesn't need to play so many cards in order to do what it needs to do. Maybe even half its deck, even less than that, can be the engine cards, and then you can play traps, you can play hand traps, you can play board breakers. The deck can incorporate so much depending on the format, depending on what the best decks actually are when we get to know the format little bit better, but I guess we already have a pretty good idea of what we're going to face. So if you want to play the deck, and I think this is time to pick them up. And the cards are supers and commons. I mean, if you already had the deck before, the rest of the cards, you don't even have to spend anything for the new cards. Yes, the old cards got a little bit pricier just because the support is so good and it's so cheap. So if you did not have the cards before, don't even worry about that, because they're going to get reprinted in the Megatins, so they're going to be super budget as a whole very, very soon. But if you already have the deck, then you're in luck, because you can just pick up the new cards for free, and then you just have a really, really good rogue deck. And I think it's a really fun deck. I mean, come on, the deck can do so many different plays. You have so many options in use. So yeah, I think this is going to be a really fun deck and a really good rogue deck. And to be honest, yes, I think it's going to be the best rogue deck. Maybe I'm wrong, but we'll have to wait and see. But still, I think the deck is so good after Lightning Overdrive. So yeah, that's the list, guys. This list, I think, has made me so happy about the upcoming format, because just having a hard time making a rogue contenders list means that you have so many different options on what to put. There were so many other decks that I was considering putting in a list like this. I mean, I was considering stuff like Emancipators, maybe even Cyber Dragons or Grand Magi. There were so many other decks that I could put as honorable mentions in a video like this that I would have to make 10 more minutes in this video, but I don't really want to do that. I want to leave that to you for the comments down below. If you have any other suggestions of decks that are going to be good, if you know that there's another sleeper OP deck that's going to be a really good rogue contender, then of course comment down below. Let's have a discussion and see what other decks we can come up with, because the more decks we see that we can play in the upcoming format, the better format we're going to have. So yeah, variety is always better. This is always a thing for Yu-Gi-Oh! So yeah, that's the video, guys. If you enjoyed it, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss upcoming content, and we'll see you next time.